The weight of the Arizona sun bore down upon Shafter like God's own judgment, scorching everything it touched and offering no mercy to those who dared venture out in the unrelenting heat of the afternoon. Adelaide Colt stared down the dusty road ahead, urging her two exhausted horses forward as sweat dripped down her neck and dampened the collar of her high-necked dress. She was running out of water, running out of patience, and running out of time. "Just a little further," she encouraged the horses, her voice hoarse from thirst. The wagon lurched forward, the wooden wheels grinding against the rocky terrain. Adelaide had never intended to make this journey alone, but circumstances had forced her hand. Her father's body lay wrapped in canvas in the back of the wagon, and she was determined to bring him home to Shafter for a proper burial. A sudden crack split the air, and Adelaide's heart sank as the right front wheel of her wagon struck a jagged rock hidden beneath the sandy path. The horses reared in alarm as the wagon pitched sideways, throwing Adelaide from her seat. She landed hard on the ground, the breath knocked from her lungs. Before she could scramble to her feet, the wagon tilted further, collapsing onto its side with a deafening crash. Adelaide's scream pierced the silence of the desert as the weight of the wagon pinned her legs to the ground. Pain shot through her body like lightning. The horses, still harnessed to the fallen vehicle, snorted and stamped nervously nearby. "Help!" she cried out, her voice barely carrying in the vast emptiness of the desert. "Somebody please help me!" The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the sun continued its merciless assault. Adelaide's consciousness began to waver, darkness creeping into the edges of her vision. She was going to die here, alone in the desert, just like her father. The irony of it brought tears to her eyes. Just as her hope began to fade, the sound of hoofbeats reached her ears. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, a cruel trick played by her desperate mind. But then a shadow fell across her face, blocking out the harsh sunlight. "Miss, can you hear me?" Adelaide forced her eyes open to find the silhouette of a man standing over her. The sun behind him created a halo around his broad-shouldered frame, his face hidden in shadow beneath the wide brim of his hat. "My legs," she managed to gasp. "The wagon, please." The stranger knelt beside her, assessing the situation. His face came into view strong-jawed and weathered by the elements, with eyes as blue as the Arizona sky. He wore a faded denim shirt, leather vest, and a bandana around his neck, the typical garb of a cowboy. But there was nothing typical about the concern etched in his features. "Name's Zachary Daniels," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I'm going to get you out from under there, miss. Don't you worry." Before Adelaide could respond, Zachary positioned himself beside the overturned wagon. He braced his boots in the sand, took a deep breath, and with a grunt of exertion, he lifted the edge of the heavy wagon with one powerful arm. "Can you pull yourself free?" he asked, muscles straining with the effort. Adelaide, stunned by his display of strength, snapped back to her senses and dragged herself from beneath the wagon, wincing as pain shot through her legs. As soon as she was clear, Zachary carefully lowered the wagon back to the ground. "Thank you," Adelaide whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Zachary knelt beside her again, examining her legs with gentle hands. "Nothing appears broken, but you'll have some nasty bruises. You're lucky I was passing through." "My father," Adelaide said suddenly, remembering the precious cargo in her wagon. "He's in the back." "We need to one thing at a time, miss," Zachary interrupted softly. "Let's get you some water and tend to your injuries first." He helped Adelaide to a small patch of shade created by a nearby rock formation and retrieved a canteen from his saddlebag. As she drank the cool water gratefully, Zachary returned to the wagon and assessed the damage. "Your wheels busted and the axles cracked," he announced after a thorough inspection. "And your horses look about ready to drop." He turned to face her, adjusting his hat to shield his eyes from the sun. "Mind telling me what brings a lady like yourself out here alone?" Adelaide swallowed hard, gathering her composure. "My name is Adelaide Colt. My father and I were traveling from Tucson back to our home in Shafter when he passed away suddenly 2 days ago. I'm bringing him home to bury him beside my mother." Zachary's expression softened. "I'm mighty sorry for your loss, Miss Colt." He glanced at the sun, which was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. "We're still a good day's ride from Shafter, and we can't travel with your wagon in this condition. There's a small settlement about 3 miles west of here. We can rest there for the night, and I'll help you repair your wagon in the morning." Adelaide hesitated, eyeing the stranger warily. Though he had saved her life, she knew all too well the dangers a woman faced traveling alone with a man she'd just met. Sensing her reservation, Zachary stepped back and raised his hand slightly. "You have my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe with me, Miss Colt. I understand your caution, but night falls quickly in the desert, and it's not safe for either of us to remain here." After a moment's consideration, Adelaide nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I accept your help." Within the hour, Zachary had transferred Adelaide's father's body to his own horse, secured what belongings he could salvage from the wagon, and helped Adelaide onto his second horse, a sturdy paint mare. "I use her for pack trips," he explained as he adjusted the stirrups for Adelaide. "She's gentle as they come." As they rode toward the settlement, Adelaide studied her rescuer's profile. There was something comforting about his presence, a quiet strength that seemed to extend beyond his physical capabilities. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a small measure of peace. "You mentioned you're from Shafter," Zachary said, breaking the silence. "The Colts. You wouldn't happen to be related to Harold Colt, would you?" Adelaide's eyes widened in surprise. "He was my father." "Did you know him?" A faint smile touched Zachary's lips. "I did business with him a few times. He was a fair man, your father, tough but honest." "Yes, he was," Adelaide replied softly. "After my mother died 5 years ago, it was just the two of us. He was everything to me." She swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "We went to Tucson to secure a loan to expand our general store, but on the return journey, he complained of pains in his chest. By morning, he was gone." Zachary nodded solemnly. "Life can change in the blink of an eye out here." "I'm truly sorry, Miss Colt." As the settlement came into view, a small cluster of buildings surrounded by corrals and a windmill, Adelaide found herself grateful for Zachary Daniels' timely appearance in her life. Little did she know that this chance encounter in the desert would alter the course of her future forever. The settlement, which Zachary referred to as Cooper's Station, consisted of a trading post, a stable, a small boarding house, and a handful of modest dwellings. As they approached, a wiry man with a gray-streaked beard emerged from the trading post, squinting at them in the fading light. "Well, look what the desert blew in," the man called out. "Zachary Daniels, as I live and breathe, didn't expect to see you for another month." "Change of plans, Elijah," Zachary replied, dismounting smoothly. "Miss Colt here had some trouble with her wagon a few miles east. We need lodging for the night and some assistance with repairs come morning." Elijah's gaze shifted to Adelaide, his expression softening as he noted her disheveled appearance and the somber bundle secured to Zachary's horse. Of course. Martha will get a room ready for the lady." He gestured toward the boarding house. "And is that?" "Her father," Zachary confirmed quietly. "We'll need somewhere respectful to keep him until we can reach Shafter." Understanding dawned on Elijah's weathered face. The storeroom behind the trading post stays cool. It'll do for now. I'll help you get him situated." While Zachary and Elijah took care of her father's remains, Adelaide was led to the boarding house by Martha Cooper, Elijah's wife, a plump, maternal woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "You poor dear," Martha clucked as she helped Adelaide into a chair in the small dining room. "You look half dead yourself. Let me fetch you some stew and fresh bread while Lily prepares your room." Too exhausted to protest, Adelaide accepted the older woman's ministrations gratefully. The stew was hearty and flavorful, warming her from the inside out as she ate. By the time Zachary joined her at the table, some color had returned to her pale cheeks. "Your father is resting comfortably," he assured her, accepting a bowl of stew from Martha. "Elijah says we can use his tools to fix your wagon wheel, and he's got an extra axle we can modify to fit." Adelaide set down her spoon, her eyes meeting Zachary's across the table. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Daniels. You've been so kind to a complete stranger." "Out here, kindness isn't a luxury, it's a necessity," Zachary replied simply. "And please call me Zach. Everyone does." "Then you must call me Adelaide," she responded with a small smile. After dinner, Martha showed Adelaide to a small but clean room on the second floor of the boarding house. A copper tub had been filled with warm water, and clean clothes, a simple dress that had belonged to Martha's daughter, were laid out on the bed. "You bathe and get some rest, dear," Martha instructed. "Everything looks brighter after a good night's sleep." Alone in the room, Adelaide sank into the bathtub with a sigh of relief, washing away the dust and fear of the day. As she dressed in the borrowed nightgown, she moved to the window, gazing out at the stars that spangled the desert sky. In the yard below, she spotted Zachary sitting on a bench outside the stable, cleaning his rifle by the light of a lantern. There was something mesmerizing about the methodical movement of his hands, the quiet competence with which he performed even this routine task. She wondered about him, what had brought him to this remote part of the territory, why he traveled alone, and what awaited him in Shafter. Tomorrow they would repair her wagon and continue their journey. Adelaide wasn't sure what would happen once they reached Shafter, but for tonight, she was simply grateful to be alive, thanks to the cowboy with the strength to lift a wagon with one arm and the compassion to lift her spirits with the other. Morning arrived with the gentle knock of Martha Cooper on Adelaide's door, accompanied by the aroma of fresh coffee and frying bacon. After a hearty breakfast, Adelaide found Zachary and Elijah already at work on her wagon, which they had transported to the settlement during the early hours. "Good morning, Adelaide," Zachary greeted her, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, watching as he expertly fitted the new axle to her wagon. "You're quite skilled with repairs." Zachary smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "When you've spent as much time on the trail as I have, you learn to fix just about anything." Adelaide found herself curious about this man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. "And what brings you to these parts, Zach? Are you a rancher? A trader?" "A bit of both, I suppose," he replied, tightening a bolt with a wrench. "I was a ranch hand down in Texas for many years, but I've been on my own for the past 5, driving cattle and horses up to Montana and back. I've got a small spread outside of Shafter that I'm working to build up." "You have a ranch near Shafter?" Adelaide asked, surprised. "I don't recall hearing about it." "It's nothing grand, just 40 acres and a modest cabin about 7 miles northwest of town," Zachary explained. "I'm only there a few months of the year. The rest of the time I'm on the trail or working odd jobs." As they conversed, Adelaide found herself increasingly drawn to Zachary's quiet strength and straightforward manner. He spoke without pretense, his words measured and thoughtful. By midday, the wagon was repaired, her father's body carefully returned to its place, and their supplies replenished thanks to Elijah's generosity. "You folks be careful out there," Martha said as she handed Adelaide a bundle of food for their journey. "There's been talk of bandits along the western route." Zachary nodded, his expression serious. "We'll take the northern path. It's longer but safer." As they departed from Cooper's station, Adelaide felt a peculiar mix of emotions: grief for her father, anxiety about her uncertain future in Shafter without him, and a growing appreciation for the man riding beside her. Zachary had insisted on accompanying her all the way to Shafter, despite her assurances that she could manage on her own now that the wagon was repaired. "I gave my word that I'd see you home safely," he had said firmly. "Besides, I'm headed that way myself." The journey to Shafter would take a full day of travel, and as they made their way across the rugged landscape, Adelaide found herself sharing stories of her life with Zachary, tales of growing up as the daughter of a general store owner, of helping her father with the books since she was 12, of her mother's illness and passing 5 years prior. In turn, Zachary spoke of his own past, his childhood on a ranch in East Texas, the death of his parents in a flash flood when he was 17, his years drifting from one job to the next before saving enough to purchase his small piece of land near Shafter. "I chose Arizona because of the sky," he confessed as they stopped to water the horses by a small creek. "Sounds foolish, I know, but the first time I rode through this territory, I looked up and felt like I could see forever. Something about that vastness called to me." Adelaide smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. "It's not foolish at all. The desert has its own kind of beauty, harsh but honest. Like its people," Zachary added, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he turned away to refill their canteens. As the day wore on, Adelaide found herself studying Zachary when he wasn't looking, the way the sun glinted off his light brown hair, the confident set of his shoulders as he rode, the gentle way he handled the horses. There was an integrity about him that she found increasingly attractive, a reliability that was rare in a world where men often made promises they had no intention of keeping. The sun was beginning to set when they crested a hill, and Shafter came into view below them, a modest but thriving town nestled in a valley, with the imposing peak of Mount Jefferson standing sentinel in the distance. "Almost home," Zachary said softly, and Adelaide felt tears well in her eyes at the sight of the familiar buildings. "Yes," she whispered, "almost home." Word of their approach spread quickly through town, and by the time they reached Main Street, a small crowd had gathered. The local undertaker, Mr. Finch, stepped forward immediately to take charge of Harold Colt's remains, speaking in hushed, respectful tones as he directed his assistants. Zachary helped Adelaide down from the wagon, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. The townspeople surrounded them, offering condolences and support. Adelaide, overwhelmed by their kindness and the finality of her return without her father, swayed slightly on her feet. Zachary's hand at her elbow kept her upright. "Let's get you settled," he murmured. "Where is your home?" "Above the store," she replied, gesturing toward the 2-story building at the end of the street with Colt's General Merchandise painted across its facade. "But I should go with Mr. Finch, my father. Mr. Finch will take good care of your father," Zachary assured her. "You need rest. You've been through an ordeal." Too weary to argue, Adelaide allowed Zachary to lead her through the crowd toward the store. Mrs. Prescott, the widow who helped run the store in Harold's absence, hurried forward to embrace Adelaide, her plump arms enveloping the younger woman in a comforting hug. "My dear girl, we've been so worried," Mrs. Prescott exclaimed. When you didn't return on schedule, we feared the worst, and now poor Harold." Her voice trailed off as she dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "If it weren't for Mr. Daniels, I might not have made it back at all," Adelaide said, glancing gratefully at Zachary, who stood a respectful distance away, hat in hand. Mrs. Prescott turned her attention to the cowboy, assessing him with shrewd eyes. "Then we owe you our thanks, Mr. Daniels. Adelaide is precious to all of us in Shafter." Zachary nodded modestly. "Anyone would have done the same." "But it was you who did it," Mrs. Prescott stated firmly. "Now you'll stay for supper at the very least. I've got a stew simmering that could use eating." And so Zachary found himself seated at the Colt's kitchen table that evening, sharing a meal with Adelaide and Mrs. Prescott. The older woman dominated the conversation, filling Adelaide in on town events during her absence and asking pointed questions about Zachary's background and intentions. "Mrs. Prescott," Adelaide finally interrupted, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Mr. Daniels rescued me from certain death and escorted me safely home. He deserves our gratitude, not an interrogation." The widow had the grace to look abashed. "Of course, dear. I'm merely looking out for your interests. A young woman alone needs to be careful, especially now." After supper, Zachary rose to take his leave. "I should find lodging for the night. I'll stop by tomorrow to check on you before I head out to my place." "The Shafter Hotel is just down the street," Mrs. Prescott offered. "Thank you for everything, Zach," Adelaide said as she walked him to the door. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did." Zachary's blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I'm glad I was there, Adelaide. Try to get some rest." After he left, Adelaide stood at the window, watching his tall figure move down the street toward the hotel. Mrs. Prescott appeared at her side, a knowing look on her face. "He's a fine-looking man," she commented casually. "And clearly capable." Adelaide turned away from the window. "He's a kind stranger who helped me in my time of need. Nothing more." But as she prepared for bed that night, Adelaide couldn't help but replay their journey in her mind, the gentle strength of Zachary's hands as he tended her injuries, the quiet rumble of his voice as he shared stories of his travels, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than grief stirring in her heart. The following days passed in a blur of funeral preparations and condolence calls. Harold Colt had been well respected in Shafter, and the entire town turned out for his burial. Adelaide stood beside the grave, dry-eyed and composed, as Pastor Miller delivered a heartfelt eulogy. Zachary stood at the back of the gathering, his hat held respectfully in his hands, a steady presence that Adelaide found herself drawing strength from even across the distance between them. After the service, as the mourners dispersed, Zachary approached her. "I'm sorry for your loss, Adelaide. Your father was a good man." "Thank you for being here," she replied softly. "I understand you need to get back to your ranch." "I do have business to attend to," he admitted. "But I'd like to call on you in a few days, if I may, to see how you're faring." Adelaide felt a small flutter in her chest at his words. "I'd like that." True to his word, Zachary returned to town 3 days later, bringing with him a haunch of venison and a handful of wildflowers. Adelaide welcomed him into the store, conscious of Mrs. Prescott's interested observation from behind the counter. "I thought you might appreciate some fresh meat," Zachary said, presenting the wrapped venison. "And these reminded me of you." He held out the wildflower's desert blooms in vibrant purples and yellows, delicate but resilient, thriving where others would wither. Adelaide accepted the flowers with a genuine smile, the first since her father's passing. "They're beautiful, Zach. Thank you." They fell into a pattern over the following weeks. Zachary would ride into town every few days, ostensibly to purchase supplies for his ranch but inevitably spending hours at the general store, helping Adelaide with heavy lifting, repairing shelving, or simply keeping her company as she sorted inventory. The townspeople began to take notice of the cowboys' regular visits, and gossip buzzed through Shafter like bees in summer. Adelaide found herself both embarrassed by and appreciative of the attention. The predictable rhythm of Zachary's visits gave her something to look forward to during a time when the future seemed uncertain and daunting. One evening, as they sat on the porch behind the store watching the sunset, Adelaide broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "I don't know if I can manage the store alone," she admitted, her hands twisting in her lap. "Father handled all the ordering and the finances. I helped with the books, but there's so much I don't understand about running a business." Zachary considered her words carefully. "You're smarter than you give yourself credit for, Adelaide. You know this town and its people. You understand what they need. But the suppliers in Tucson, they won't take a woman seriously, and traveling alone for stock." She shook her head, remembering all too vividly her last journey. "What if you had a partner?" Zachary suggested. "Someone to handle the travel and negotiate with suppliers while you manage the store itself." Adelaide looked at him in surprise. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Daniels?" A slight smile curved his lips. "Perhaps I am. My ranch isn't turning a profit yet, and I could use a steady income. I know a fair bit about trade from my years on the trail. It might be a solution that benefits us both." The idea was appealing, even practical, but Adelaide hesitated. What would people say? A single woman in business with a single man. "They'll talk regardless," Zachary pointed out pragmatically. "But your father's store is important to this town. I think most folks would rather see it continue under your management than close its doors." Adelaide nodded slowly. "Let me consider it. It's a significant decision." "Of course," Zachary agreed, rising from his chair. "Take all the time you need." As he prepared to leave, Adelaide impulsively caught his hand. "Thank you, Zach, not just for the offer, but for everything. For finding me that day, for bringing me home, for being here now." Zachary's fingers tightened around hers briefly. "I'm glad I found you, Adelaide Colt," he said quietly, and she knew he meant more than just discovering her trapped beneath the wagon. After a week of consideration and lengthy discussions with Mrs. Prescott, Adelaide accepted Zachary's proposal of a business partnership. They drew up an agreement with the help of Judge Wilson, the town's legal authority, establishing the terms of their arrangement. Zachary would invest his savings to expand the store's inventory, handle supply runs to Tucson and other larger towns, and assist with the physical operations of the business. Adelaide would manage day-to-day sales, keep the books, and make decisions about stock and pricing. The arrangement proved successful almost immediately. Zachary's experience with traders throughout the territory allowed him to negotiate better prices for goods, and his connections brought new products to Colt's general merchandise that had never been available in Shafter before. Adelaide's friendly manner and understanding of the townspeople's needs ensured customer loyalty, and soon the store was thriving as never before. As summer gave way to autumn, Adelaide and Zachary settled into a comfortable routine. She continued to live above the store, while he split his time between the store and his small ranch outside town. They worked well together, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. But beneath the surface of their professional partnership, something deeper was growing. Adelaide found herself watching the clock on days when Zachary was expected from his ranch, her heart quickening at the sound of his boots on the wooden floor of the store. For his part, Zachary lingered longer in town than was strictly necessary for business, finding reasons to stay and talk with Adelaide after the store closed for the day. On a crisp October evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Adelaide's living quarters going over the monthly accounts, Zachary cleared his throat nervously. "There's a harvest dance at the town hall this Saturday," he said, keeping his eyes on the ledger before him. "I was wondering if you might like to attend, with me." Adelaide looked up, her pencil poised mid-calculation. As business partners, Zachary finally raised his gaze to meet hers. "No, Adelaide, not as business partners." The implication hung in the air between them. Adelaide felt her cheeks warm as she understood what he was truly asking. "I'd be delighted to accompany you to the dance, Zach." His smile, rare and transformative, made her heart skip a beat. "I'll call for you at 7 then." The night of the harvest dance, Adelaide spent more time than usual on her appearance. She wore her best dress, a deep blue creation with delicate lace trim that her mother had helped her make before her passing. It had been years since Adelaide had worn it, saving it for special occasions that rarely came in Shafter. She arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun, allowing soft tendrils to frame her face. When Zachary arrived promptly at 7, he stood momentarily speechless in the doorway at the sight of her. He had traded his usual trail-worn attire for a clean black suit, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. "You look beautiful," he finally managed, offering her a small bouquet of late-blooming desert flowers. "As do you," Adelaide replied, then blushed at her forwardness. "Handsome, I mean." The harvest dance was a long-standing tradition in Shafter, bringing together ranchers, townspeople, and even visitors from neighboring settlements. The town hall was festooned with autumn decorations, dried corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every surface. A small band played lively tunes while couples whirled around the dance floor. Adelaide was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed them as they entered the hall. Though she and Zachary had been business partners for months now, their appearance together at a social event signified something more significant to the watchful eyes of the town. "Ignore them," Zachary murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "They'll find something else to gossip about by tomorrow." Adelaide smiled up at him gratefully. "I'm not concerned with their talk. I'm happy to be here with you." The evening passed in a whirl of music and laughter. Zachary proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding Adelaide confidently through waltzes and reels. During a break in the dancing, as they stood by the refreshment table sipping punch, Mayor Williams approached them. "Miss Colt, Mr. Daniels." The portly man greeted them cheerfully. "Fine evening, isn't it? And I must say, your store is becoming quite the establishment. Those new fabric selections you brought in last month were a hit with my wife." "Thank you, Mayor," Adelaide responded politely. "We're trying to meet the needs of Shafter as best we can." "And doing a fine job of it," the mayor assured them. "Your father would be proud, Miss Colt. You've not only maintained his legacy but enhanced it." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "And between us, I think he would approve of your choice of business partner too." As the mayor moved on to greet other constituents, Zachary turned to Adelaide with a questioning look. "Do you think that's true? Would your father have approved of me?" Adelaide considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said finally. "He valued honesty and hard work above all else. He would have respected you for those qualities." She hesitated before adding softly, "And I think he would have been grateful to you for helping his daughter find her smile again." Zachary's eyes darkened with emotion. "Adelaide—" he began, but was interrupted by the band striking up a slow waltz. "May I have this dance?" he asked instead, offering his hand. As they moved together on the dance floor, Adelaide felt a sense of rightness that she had never experienced before. In Zachary's arms, with his steady gaze holding hers, she felt both protected and free, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense. The dance ended all too soon, and as the evening grew late, Zachary suggested they step outside for some fresh air. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant in the vast Arizona sky. They walked in comfortable silence to a small garden behind the town hall where benches had been placed among flowering bushes. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Zachary said as they settled on one of the benches. "Something that's been on my mind for a while now." Adelaide's pulse quickened. "Yes, the partnership we've formed, it's been good for the store, for both of us professionally," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "But I've come to value much more than just our business arrangement, Adelaide." He took her hand gently in his. "From the moment I found you in the desert, something inside me recognized you not just as someone in need, but as someone important to my future. I lifted that wagon with one arm, but I think my heart was lifted by you at the same time." Adelaide's breath caught in her throat at his words, so honest and unadorned. "I'm not a man of great wealth or education," Zachary continued. "I can't offer you luxury or an easy life. But I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to work hard every day to build something worthwhile together, and to cherish you as you deserve to be cherished." He shifted slightly to face her more directly. "What I'm trying to say, Adelaide Colt, is that I've fallen in love with you, completely and irrevocably. And if you could find it in your heart to consider me as more than a business partner, I would be the most fortunate man in the Arizona territory." Tears welled in Adelaide's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Zach," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "I fell in love with you on our journey to Shafter, watching your kindness, your strength, your integrity. I just never dared hope you might feel the same." Relief and happiness transformed Zachary's expression. "So you wouldn't object if I were to call on you properly, with intentions that extend beyond ledgers and inventory?" Adelaide laughed softly. "I would welcome it." Zachary raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then consider this my formal declaration of intent, Miss Colt." They returned to the dance with new awareness between them, their movements more attuned, their smiles more intimate. By the end of the evening, there wasn't a soul in Shafter who hadn't noticed the change in their relationship. And the gossip mill churned with speculation about when, not if, a wedding would be announced. In the weeks that followed, Zachary began courting Adelaide in earnest. He called at the store with small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry, once even a kitten he'd rescued from a storm drain that immediately made itself at home among the dry goods. They took Sunday afternoon rides in his buckboard to his small ranch, where Adelaide helped him plant a vegetable garden beside the modest cabin and offered suggestions for improvements to make the place more comfortable. As November arrived with cooler temperatures, Zachary spent an increasing amount of time in town, taking a room at the Shafter Hotel rather than making the journey back to his ranch each night. He and Adelaide established a new routine, working together at the store during the day, sharing supper in her quarters above the shop, and spending evenings in conversation before the fireplace, discussing everything from business plans to childhood memories to dreams for the future. It was during one such evening, as they sat side by side on the small sofa watching the flames dance in the hearth, that Zachary brought up the subject of marriage. "I've been thinking about our situation," he said, his arm resting comfortably around Adelaide's shoulders. "The store is doing well, but my ranch needs more attention than I've been able to give it lately." Adelaide nodded, having noticed his distraction when discussing the property. "You're torn between your responsibilities." "Not between responsibilities," he corrected gently. "Between places. Between the store in town and the land outside it. Between my dreams and yours." "They don't have to be separate dreams, Zach," Adelaide said, turning to face him. "I've come to love your little ranch almost as much as you do." Zachary's eyes lit with hope. "Enough to consider making it your home." "As my wife." Though she had anticipated the conversation might lead in this direction, the actual proposal still took Adelaide's breath away. "Are you asking me to marry you, Zachary Daniels?" "With all my heart," he confirmed, taking both her hands in his. "I want to build a life with you, Adelaide, a life that honors your father's legacy through the store, but also creates something new that belongs just to us. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to be your husband, your partner in all things." Tears of happiness spilled down Adelaide's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Zachary gathered her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a tender kiss that spoke of promise and passion, and a future stretching bright before them. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers, a smile of pure joy illuminating his features. "I should have brought a ring," he murmured. Adelaide shook her head. "We don't need symbols, Zach. We have something far more valuable: trust and respect built through adversity." "Nevertheless," he insisted, "you deserve a proper token of my commitment. I'll ride to Tucson next week and return with a ring worthy of you." True to his word, Zachary made the journey to Tucson and returned with a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire that matched Adelaide's eyes. He presented it to her on Christmas Eve, slipping it onto her finger as they stood before the town's Christmas tree in the square, surrounded by well-wishers. They set their wedding date for April 15, 1884, when the desert would be blooming with spring flowers and the worst heat of the year was still months away. The entire town buzzed with excitement over the upcoming nuptials. Mrs. Prescott appointed herself wedding coordinator, directing preparations with the efficiency of a general marshalling troops. In the meantime, Adelaide and Zachary worked to reconcile their separate lives into one shared future. They decided to maintain her rooms above the store for nights when business kept them in town late, but to make the ranch their primary residence. They would hire additional help for the store, a young man to handle deliveries and assist with heavy work, and a girl to mind the counter when Adelaide was at the ranch. By mutual agreement, they also decided to expand both enterprises. The store would grow to include a proper haberdashery and millinery section, while the ranch would increase its cattle herd and add a small horse breeding operation, capitalizing on Zachary's experience with quality stock. As their wedding day approached, Adelaide found herself increasingly reflective. One evening, as they walked back to the store after supper at the Prescotts, she voiced the thought that had been circling in her mind. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have gone if you hadn't happened upon me that day in the desert, if you had taken another route or traveled an hour later?" Zachary considered her question seriously, as was his way. "I've never been a man who believed much in coincidence," he finally said. "My mother used to say that God places people in our paths at exactly the right moment, if only we have the wisdom to recognize why they're there." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know if it was divine intervention or just extraordinary luck that led me to you that day, but I do know that finding you trapped beneath that wagon was the beginning of the most important journey of my life." Adelaide leaned into his side, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I was so afraid that day, afraid of dying alone in the desert, afraid of what would become of my father's remains, afraid of the future without him. You didn't just lift that wagon with your strength, Zach. You lifted the weight of all those fears. And you, he responded softly, gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing, a purpose beyond just surviving, a reason to build something lasting. They reached the store and paused on the porch, reluctant to end their evening together despite the late hour. The street was quiet, most of Shafter's residents already retired for the night. 6 more weeks, Adelaide said, glancing down at the sapphire ring that glinted in the moonlight. It seems both an eternity and no time at all. Zachary lifted her chin gently with his finger, his gaze tender. Whether it's 6 weeks or 6 decades, Adelaide Colt, I'll be counting every moment until I can call you my wife. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations and unexpected challenges. A late-season storm damaged the roof of the church, necessitating hasty repairs. A shipment of special-ordered fabric for Adelaide's wedding dress was delayed, causing Mrs. Prescott and the town seamstress, Mrs. Holloway, no small amount of consternation. And Zachary's sister Caroline, traveling from Texas for the ceremony, was detained when the stagecoach broke an axle 50 miles from Shafter. Yet through it all, Adelaide and Zachary faced each obstacle together, strengthening their bond through shared problem-solving and mutual support. By the time April 15th dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of desert blooms, they had weathered sufficient trials to feel confident in their partnership's resilience. Adelaide stood in her bedroom above the store, gazing at her reflection in the full-length mirror. Mrs. Prescott had insisted on bringing up the narrow stairs for this occasion. Her wedding dress, finally completed just 2 days prior, was a vision of ivory satin and delicate lace, modest yet elegant in its design. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers and a veil that had belonged to her mother. "You look absolutely beautiful," Mrs. Prescott declared, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Your parents would be so proud." Adelaide smiled, touched by the older woman's emotion. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Prescott, for helping with the store after Father died, for supporting my partnership with Zach, for making today possible. You've been like family to me." Mrs. Prescott embraced her carefully, mindful of the dress. "You are family, dear girl, and that fine young man waiting for you at the church, he's family now too." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Judge Wilson, who had agreed to escort Adelaide down the aisle in the absence of her father. "It's time, Miss Colt," he said, offering his arm with a courtly bow. "Your groom is waiting, and if his pacing is any indication, he's rather eager for your arrival." The church was filled to capacity, with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area, all gathered to witness the union of 2 people who had become central to Shafter's community. As Adelaide walked down the aisle on Judge Wilson's arm, her eyes found Zachary standing tall and handsome at the altar, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration that made her heart swell with love. Pastor Miller conducted the ceremony with warmth and sincerity, speaking of the importance of partnership, respect, and enduring commitment. When it came time for their vows, Zachary took Adelaide's hands in his voice clear and steady as he pledged his life and love to her. "Adelaide Colt, on the day we met, I lifted a wagon that had you trapped beneath it. Today, I make a more important promise to lift any burden that life may place upon you, to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, to honor and cherish you all the days of my life. I offer you my strength, my loyalty, my dreams, and my heart, now and forever." Adelaide, her eyes shining with unshed tears, responded with equal conviction. "Zachary Daniels, You came into my life when I had lost hope, and you restored my faith in the future. I promise to walk beside you as your equal partner, to share your joys and sorrows, to support your dreams as you have supported mine. I give you my trust, my devotion, my strength, and my heart, now and forever." As Pastor Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary gathered Adelaide into his arms for a kiss that sealed their vows, tender yet fervent, a promise of the life they would build together. The church erupted in applause and cheers as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Daniels. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous and boisterous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory. Caroline Daniels, who had arrived just hours before the ceremony, regaled guests with stories of her brother's childhood exploits, much to Zachary's chagrin and Adelaide's delight. As evening fell, the newlyweds slipped away from the festivities, boarding a decorated buckboard that would take them to Zachary's, now their ranch, for their wedding night and the beginning of their new life together. The cabin had been transformed in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Zachary had added a second bedroom in anticipation of the family they hoped to create, expanded the kitchen to accommodate Adelaide's love of baking, and built a wide, covered porch where they could sit together and watch the desert sunsets. It was still a modest home by some standards, but to Adelaide, it was perfect, a tangible representation of their shared dreams. As Zachary carried her over the threshold, Adelaide felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in the truest sense. Here, with this man who had literally and figuratively lifted her from despair, she had found her place in the world. "Welcome home, Mrs. Daniels," Zachary said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "I like the sound of that," Adelaide replied, her arms encircling his neck, "though I may need some time to get used to my new name." "We have all the time in the world," he assured her, bending to claim her lips in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The years that followed were filled with hard work, joy, challenges, and growth, both of their businesses and their family. By their first anniversary, Adelaide was expecting their first child, and in December of 1885, she gave birth to a healthy son whom they named William Harold Daniels, honoring both Zachary's father and Adelaide's. The general store continued to flourish under their joint management, becoming the most successful establishment of its kind in the county. They added a dedicated dress shop and expanded into hardware and agricultural supplies, serving not only Shafter but the surrounding communities as well. The ranch prospered too, with Zachary's careful stewardship and Adelaide's practical business sense guiding their investments. They added acreage, increased their cattle herd, and established a reputation for breeding exceptional horses that commanded premium prices throughout the territory. Their family grew alongside their enterprises. In 1887, Adelaide gave birth to twin girls, Alina and Margaret, who inherited their mother's spirited nature and their father's determined resilience. And in 1890, their youngest son, James, completed their family, a thoughtful child with a gift for understanding animals that made him a natural rancher from an early age. Through it all, the drought of '89 that threatened their cattle, the fire that damaged the store in '91, the economic downturn that affected the entire territory in '93, Adelaide and Zachary faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house, now a substantial home that had been expanded 3 times to accommodate their growing family, Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. "Do you remember what you said to me the day you proposed?" she asked, her head resting comfortably on Zachary's shoulder as they watched their children playing in the yard. "You said you couldn't offer me luxury or an easy life." Zachary chuckled, his arm tightening around her waist. "I recall. Not my most persuasive argument looking back. But you were wrong," Adelaide continued, lifting her head to meet his gaze. "You've given me everything I could ever want: a partnership based on respect, a family filled with love, a legacy we've built together. That's the greatest luxury I could imagine." Zachary's eyes, still as blue and clear as the day they met, softened with emotion. "You're the one who enriched my life beyond measure, Adelaide. Finding you that day was the beginning of everything good that's come since." "It's strange to think how close we came to never meeting," she mused. "If my wagon hadn't broken down in that exact spot, if you hadn't taken that particular route." "I don't believe it was chance," Zachary said firmly. "Some things are meant to be, Adelaide. We were meant to find each other." As the sun set over their land, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, Adelaide silently agreed. From tragedy had come joy, from a chance encounter had grown a lifetime of love. The cowboy who had lifted a wagon with one arm and her heart with the other had given her far more than rescue that day in the desert. He had given her a future filled with purpose, passion, and profound happiness. And as their children called for them to join in their game, Zachary and Adelaide rose together, partners in all things, bound by a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, but had grown into something as enduring as the Arizona landscape that had brought them together.